Time trickled past. The cultivators who were training in Futian's micro-world utilized every second to improve their cultivation and to break through to the next plane. However, some of them chose not to break through to the Imperial realm, even though they were qualified to do so. It was because they wished to contribute to the battlefield as those under the Imperial realm. Time trickled past. The cultivators who were training in Futian's micro-world utilized every second to improve their cultivation and to break through to the next plane. However, some of them chose not to break through to the Imperial realm, even though they were qualified to do so. It was because they wished to contribute to the battlefield as those under the Imperial realm. By the time the forces of the human realm and their allies had completed their preparations for war in the outside world, a few decades had passed. On this day, Futian and a few cultivators gathered at the heavenly palace. Wuxian Buddha Lord said to Futian, "The western heaven has been invaded by the armies of the dark world and the empty divine realm. I need to rush back there with my troops." The Buddhist sects had been able to seize more time for cultivation in the micro-world. As a result, the Arhat Legion had grown stronger. It was time for them to return and join the war now. Buddha Lord, please lead the Arhat Legion to join the war in the Western Heaven. On top of that, I will assign the Four Corners Legion to go with you. You may order them as you see fit, Futian replied. It was still rather challenging for the members of the Western Heaven to fight against the invasion of two major worlds, the Dark World and the empty divine realm alone. The commanders of the Four Corners Legion were the four disciples of Futian. Among them were Fang Xiyuan and Tai Tu. Fang Xiyuan, Futian called. Yes, master. Fang Xiyuan appeared even more charming now with his long hair. Nevertheless, his temperament was calm. He was no longer the inexperienced lad like he used to be. Even though not much time had passed in the outside world, he and his friends had been cultivating for more than 100 years in the micro-world. Therefore, he had had 100 years of training to hone himself. Futian ordered, "The four of you, lead the Four Corners Legion and the troops under your command to aid the Buddhist sects in war. Obey the commands of the Buddhist sections." "Yes, master," Fang Xiyuan replied while nodding. Then, he bowed towards Wuxian Buddha Lord and said, "I will surely obey the commands of Buddha Lord. Please keep reading on Wuxia World." Iu Amipa. Wuxian Buddha Lord put his palms together as a gesture of gratitude. "The four of you, leave with Buddha Lord," Futian commanded. Immediately, the four of them went to summon their troops for departure. The cultivators from the world of Buddhism also left the micro-world one by one. 2 legions had been sent off to assist the Western Heaven in war. Father, let the Revelation Legion led by Diyuan and the Ziwei Legion led by Emperor Chen aid the members of the Divine Prefecture in war, Futian said while looking at Donghuang the Great. Not long ago, the troops of the Devil World had entered into the space passage that connected their world and the Divine Prefecture. They were now stationed at the North Cliff region. The Devil World and the Divine Prefecture were next to each other. Hence, the troops of the Devil World were in charge of occupying the Divine Prefecture. Futian did not wish to fight against the troops of the Devil World. However, things had not gone as he wanted. The troops of the Devil World chose to participate in the War of the Seven Realms and were about to attack the Divine Prefecture. Donghuang the Great nodded in agreement as he said, "The troops of the Devil World are powerful. It will be a brutal fight. From the looks of it, our fight with them is inevitable." Donghuang the Great did not wish to engage in war with the Devil World either. He had a lot of respect for the Devil Emperor, and the two of them admired each other. Nevertheless, they were destined to be enemies due to their different stances. If Donghuang the Great had a choice, he would choose to be friends with the Devil Emperor. How he wished the two of them could chit-chat and play Weiqi together peacefully, just like what they did last time when the Devil Emperor visited Donghuang Imperial Palace. The Devil Emperor was the overlord who withstood the tribulations of the Devil Abyss on his own. The entire Devil World rested on his shoulders. This time, the human ancestor used the welfare of the members of the Devil World to threaten the Devil Emperor. The latter was forced to declare war on the Divine Prefecture to preserve his people's lives. Yi Futian could still strive to get the devil world to side with him if the human ancestor had not done so. The situation might have been different if they could postpone the war until Yu Sheng had seized control of the devil world. This was also Yu Tu's intention. He had set up things so that one day, the forces of the devil world and the divine prefecture could both be utilized by Yi Futian. Diyuan, Donghuang the Great called, lead the Revelation Legion and head back to the divine prefecture. Yes, father, Donghuang Diyuan responded while nodding. Even though she was the descendant of Emperor Yi Qing, she had been raised by Donghuang the Great since birth. The latter had treated her like his own child. Even up until now, her surname was still Donghuang. Hence, she still called Donghuang the Great her father. In her eyes, both Donghuang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing were her fathers, with the former being her foster father, while the latter being her biological father. Donghuang Diyuan left the palace. Yi Futian then assigned Emperor Chen, formerly known as Lord Chen, to lead the Ziwei Legion and join Donghuang Diyuan. After 4 legions had departed to the Western Heaven and the Divine Prefecture, there were only 2 legions left behind. They were the Heaven Court Legion and the Heavenly Mandate Legion. The former consisted of forces from the original Heaven Realm, while the latter was made up of cultivators, following Yi Futian since the beginning. Yi Futian had ordered the 6 major legions to go to separate battlefields because their opponents were no longer fighting alone this time. They had dispersed their armies. All the space passageways were now open. This time, the allied forces of the human realm and the other 4 realms would most likely strike in tandem. This meant that the Heaven Realm, the Divine Prefecture, and the Western Heaven would be thrown into war simultaneously. Hence, Yi Futian had no choice but to distribute the 6 major legions across the 3 different worlds. The cultivators of the Heaven Realm could see the troops of the human realm gathering at the other end of the space passageway. The latter were all garbed in green clothes. They used this method to distinguish their own members. Once the war erupted, the world would be thrown into chaos. If they did not standardize their outfits, they would not be able to differentiate between their own members. In the Heavenly Imperial City, the Heaven Court Legion and the Heavenly Mandate Legion had lined up in formation. Their gazes were fixed on the space passage, and they were all ready for war. All the cultivators in the Heavenly Imperial City were looking up at the sky. Now there were very few people left in the city. Most of them had evacuated. Just then, a cultivator took off his green robe and threw it up into the air. A mass of flames incinerated the green robe. When they saw this scene, others in different parts of the city took off their green robes and also threw them up in the air, burning them. In an instant, the sky above the city was ablaze with burning robes. If they wore green robes, they might have the opportunity to infiltrate the enemy camp and make it out alive. They could even betray the Heaven Realm and join the human realm. This was bound to happen, and many people would certainly do so. However, many people still burnt their robes in public. This was a wordless oath. They burnt their robes and were prepared to fight. "They are coming," someone said. Just then, intense tremors came from the space passage in the sky. A vast army appeared on the other side of the passageway. They were prepared to enter the door of space and invade the Heaven Realm. Below the space passage, 2 legions were waiting with serious expressions. The 6 legions, including their main forces and the troops they had trained, were 1,000,000 strong. Each legion had more than 100,000 cultivators. This was a terrifying number, but it was minuscule on the current battlefield. The atmosphere in the Heavenly Imperial City was exceptionally serious and depressing. The atmosphere in the Heavenly Imperial City was exceptionally serious and depressing. The human ancestor set up the space passage above the Heavenly Imperial City. He would invade the place and directly declare war. Rumble. A dull and terrifying sound could be heard. The space passage expanded, and the entire sky became a door of space. Menacing divine power emanated from within it as it blocked out the sun. Dark clouds loomed over the city. "They are coming," someone said. Everyone in the Heavenly Imperial City looked up into the sky. At that moment, it was as though the end of the world had come. Everyone's hearts were beating intensely. Some cultivators had powerful battle intent circling their figures. This invasion was different from the last. This time, the human ancestor rallied all the cultivators of the human realm to invade the heaven realm. He wanted to unify the 7 realms. In the heavens above, beams of divine halos descended from the door of space like sky stairwells. Then, a vast army surged out from within and appeared in the sky above the crowd. The army of the human realm had descended. In an instant, the vast army immediately appeared above the heavenly imperial city, blocking out the sky. Tens of millions of troops had invaded the heaven realm. "They are here," someone said. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. The Heaven Court Legion and the Heavenly Mandate Legion had long been in formation. They had divided themselves into many smaller divisions and had been awaiting this moment. In the archer phalanx, endless dazzling light lit up right then. The light illuminated the sky. An unparalleled divine bow appeared behind Huang Jioge. At full draw, the bow seemed to shoot out a divine ray of the sun up into the heavens. The divine power of the arrow scorched the space, as it became a beam of sunlight that shot up into the sky. As one of the first few people who followed Futian wouldn't mistreat Huang Jioge. Futian directly baptized the latter with his divine power of the law, complementing Huang Jioge's natural talent. This allowed Huang Jioge to comprehend the divine power of the sun. Now Huang Jioge was already at the near deity plane, and was a top-tier existence below the great emperors. Futian also personally forged a divine bow called Sun Chaser for him. It was an imperial arm compatible with the divine power of the sun. At that moment, an extremely threatening aura reached the sky. Around Huang Jioge, other divine archers had also drawn their bows. Buzz! The divine power of the sun formed arrows that pierced and lit up the sky. They seemed to penetrate the darkness and brought the light of dawn. "Be careful!" An astonished voice cried out in the sky. The divine arrows of the sun shot over in a flash. The cultivators of the vast army had just arrived. Before they could even react, countless cultivators perished before the divine arrows of the sun, and were instantly turned to ashes. A sharp aura similarly erupted in the phalanx where Wang Yambing was. The various cultivators that he led transformed into tens of thousands of divine arms, and took to the skies simultaneously. There was nothing they could not destroy nor negate. They charged into the sky and also slaughtered many cultivators. The other cultivators also unleashed wave after wave of long-ranged attacks in tandem, killing many enemy forces. They caused the formation of the cultivators, who had just arrived, to fall into disarray. This caused the mighty army to fall into chaos. Huang Jioge kept launching volleys of arrows. The divine arrows of the sun shot out again and again, killing tens of thousands of cultivators. However, the enemy forces seemed endless as they swarmed out of the door of space. As more and more of them poured out, cultivators covered the skies above the heavenly imperial city. Rumble! With a loud rumble, the divine arrows of the sun encountered a considerable resistance. Then, a shower of meteor swords rained down, along with a menacing meteorite shower, as well as bolts of destructive thunder and lightning. The top figures who were swarming out were beginning their counterattack. The cultivators in the sky above came charging down, suppressing them. They were all wearing green robes, and unleashed the first wave of destructive attacks. In the sky above the heavenly imperial city, terrifying destructive power clashed. It was like the actual scene of the end of the world where the heavens and earth were collapsing. "Attack!" one side cried out. "Attack!" the other side responded. The sounds of slaughter reverberated throughout the space. This war was a war to end all wars. The last war paled in comparison, be it in terms of scale or cruelty. Outside the micro-world, Futian stood there looking towards the battlefield. Beside him were the various emperors. All of them did not participate in the battle. The great emperors of the human realm had not arrived yet. The cultivators below the imperial realm started the fighting first. "I wonder how many people will survive this war," said Zhuge Mingyue in a low voice next to Futian. Her voice contained a melancholic tone. She had always been an optimistic person. However, this time, she still felt pessimistic. This was a war that would destroy the world. An army of more than 1,000,000 troops descended upon the heavenly imperial city and charged towards them. This would be the greatest calamity in the history of the 7 realms up to date. Countless cultivators would become martyrs for the heaven realm. Those who made it out alive would be very lucky. Yi Futian had a heavy heart as he looked over the battlefield. The army of the human realm was already clashing with the legions of the heaven realm. Inside the destructive storm, many people were killed every second. It was tragic. Will Big Brother be alright? Zhuge Mingyue asked Yi Futian. Their big brother had also participated in this battle. Big Brother initially had the opportunity to become a great emperor, yet he did not push to achieve it. He had been preparing for this war instead. He will be fine, replied Yi Futian as he looked towards a corner of the battlefield. Over there, Sword Saint was wielding a destructive demonic blade. He slashed out again and again. Each slash shook the heavens and the earth, ripping apart the sky. He slaughtered his way through the green-robed army of the human realm alone. The demonic blade that slashed out was a saber technique of the devil world. You two personally taught him this. Bang! Right then, a terrifying sword of the divine human slashed out and clashed with Sword Saint's demonic blade. This caused the light of his saber to be extinguished. Sword Saint was knocked back a short distance. He looked up at the green-robed cultivator in the sky. The person had extraordinary temperament and appeared extremely young. The sword of the divine human, exclaimed Sword Saint as he looked at the other party. This person should be a direct descendant of the human ancestor. The cultivator was from the human divine palace. He was one of the human ancestor's disciples. His ability was very powerful. He also came over here when he saw Sword Saint massacring his way through their troops. Rumble! Terrifying demonic will churned and roared. Powerful demonic will surged from Sword Saint's figure and was extremely domineering. He stepped up into the sky. The demonic blade in his hand cleaved out. The jet-black light of the saber split the sky apart, cleaving a crack in the space. In another location, Do Zhao wielded a gigantic golden staff. He unleashed the strongest form of the will of the fighting god. It was as though he had become a war god. The staff in his hand danced and shattered the figures of the cultivators it struck, disintegrating their souls. Near Do Zhao, there was a woman wielding the divine sword of annihilation. Blood splattered like rain everywhere she passed. Everywhere the divine sword went, no one made it out alive. The woman wielding the sword actually had a face that could launch 1,000 ships. This woman was the daughter of Emperor Nan Luotian. She was of the same generation as Do Zhao and Xiaomuyu. Back in the heavenly mandate realm, she was also a very outstanding figure. Now this group of people had grown to become the core power of the legions. The army of the devil world began invading the divine prefecture from the North Cliff region. The army of the devil world began invading the divine prefecture from the North Cliff region. On the continent, black clouds covered the sky above a city. The members of the devil world filled the skies. Tens of millions of troops of the devil world began their invasion of the divine prefecture. In an extremely short amount of time, the fires of war set the vast continent ablaze. Due to the entire army of the devil world beginning their invasion from the North Cliff region, the divine prefecture utilized guerrilla tactics and did not face them head-on to block them off. The army of the devil world had powerful explosive force. If the members of the divine prefecture were to take them head-on, the outcome would be tragic. Hence, the cultivators of the divine prefecture kept sending cultivators with powerful cultivation, and those proficient in the power of space or speed to harass the enemy's operations. However, in the face of absolute power, all this was futile. Of course, even with millions of troops, the devil world still had to disperse its forces. The cultivators of the divine prefecture watched how their opponents prepared to move, and then decided on how to counter them. At the same time, the Western heaven world of Buddhism had a different approach. After the Buddhist sects knew that the forces of the dark world and the empty divine realm were invading, they immediately gathered up their forces, including the Arhat Legion and the Four Corners Legion, and joined the battlefield. In the lands where the two major worlds invaded, the most devastating clash erupted. The Buddhist sects had many members. They were devoted to their faith. They would not allow the cultivators of the dark world to desecrate the world of Buddhism. They had paid a terrible price the last time the Dark Army invaded. This time, a resistance of a much larger scale erupted. The clashes were even fiercer. The world of Buddhism was ablaze with the fires of war. In the sky above the battlefield, there were the Buddha lords. They had their palms together as they recited Buddhist scripture. They were releasing the souls of the fallen from suffering, allowing them to be reincarnated. This time, the 7 realms were all dragged into this war. No one could stay out of it. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. On the battlefield in the Heaven Realm, Nan Luotian was fighting against a disciple of the human ancestor. Her divine sword of annihilation was suppressed by the other party. Even though this disciple of the human ancestor was not as powerful as Di Hao, he was a top figure. Nan Luotian received personal guidance from Yi Futian, and she merged his divine power of the law into her techniques to attain her current combat ability. However, she still felt great pressure when facing such a strong opponent. An empty space surrounded the two of them. The others stayed away from them, for fear of being affected by the aftershock of their attacks. Right now, a menacing and gigantic sword descended from the sky. It contained the power of the human realm. Dazzling green divine halos burst forth from the sword of Nan Luotian, as it collided head-on with the falling sword. A destructive storm swept out and covered the heavens and the earth. She was forced to take a step back. Buzz! A beam of lightning charged towards the disciple of the human ancestor. Emperor Nan, father of Nan Luotian, had joined the fight. His swordsmanship had further transformed, and it was purer now. His sword charged forward boldly, as though it was the first sword created since mankind existed. Dong! A loud sound could be heard. A massive divine seal blocked the path of the sword. The divine seal covered the sun and the sky as it radiated golden divine halos. It contained the divine force of space, and it attempted to shatter the sword of Emperor Nan. However, the latter dazzled with brilliant green divine halos, and the divine seal was immediately shattered. The sword continued to bulldoze its way through with great momentum. Their opponent transformed into a divine human. He was imposing and was akin to a real god. He pointed a finger forward and touched the sword of Emperor Nan. The power from his finger caused the sword to him and shake vigorously. Swoosh! A shrill sound reverberated in space as cracks propagated on the finger of the divine human. Emperor Nan's body was pushed backward too. The father and daughter duo stood side by side as they looked at the cultivator before them. "Are you all right?" Emperor Nan asked. Nan Luotian nodded her head slightly. The two of them joined forces on the battlefield. In another location, Dozhao charged forward fearlessly and slaughtered his way into the opposing armies. Everywhere he passed, no one was spared. He swung his golden staff as he moved, and many cultivators were killed by it. Suddenly, terrifying thunder befell him. It was the chaotic divine thunder. When Dozhao's staff came in contact with the thunder, the former was corroded right away. The thunder was not shattered. Instead, it flowed along with the staff and entered Dozhao's body, causing him to go numb. Even his spiritual soul shook violently due to the shock. Dozhao stopped advancing. He raised his head to look at the figure pouncing towards him. The incoming opponent was a middle-aged man. His pupils were purple, and they glistened with the divine power of thunder. His eyes could directly affect the will of others. Swoosh! An ear-piercing sound rang. A thunder invaded the eyes of Dozhao. The middle-aged man could affect the minds of others, since his power of thunder could target spiritual souls. His mental attack was perfect to counter Dozhao's domineering physical attack. The middle-aged man extended his arms, and streaks of lightning descended from the sky. He summoned Jiutian divine thunder, and turned the vast space into his thunder domain. A brilliant divine light shone on Dozhao's glabella. His spiritual imprint radiated, and his will of the fighting god was activated to its maximum limit. His body grew larger, and his mind grew tougher, so that he would not be perturbed by the thunder. Rumble! He swung his staff, and the entire sky shook. Rumbling sounds could be heard reverberating in space. As he moved the staff back and forth, an overbearing power was generated. It then blasted towards the other party. The space was shattered, and the heavens and the earth hummed. Right at the same time, thundering sounds reverberated. Jiutian divine thunder rained down and overwhelmed the space. The thunder crashed into Dozhao's staff and body. It further attacked his spiritual soul. This time, Dou Zhao was protected by the will of the fighting god. The will surrounded his spiritual soul, as divine light flowed all around his body. Jiutian divine thunder hit his body, but he activated his power to its maximum capacity and overcame the limitation of his flesh. Dou Zhao continued to pounce towards his enemy despite the numbness he felt all over his body. When he struck out, his arm vibrated violently. Power surged from every inch of his body, and all of it was channeled into his attack. Even when both he and his staff were bathed in terrifying thunder, Dou Zhao still managed to land a critical hit on his opponent. Rumble! The staff whacked the middle-aged man, causing him to be smashed into gory pulp. He was annihilated. However, right after Dou Zhao killed the man, a group of cultivators moved towards him simultaneously. Even before they approached him, their Jiutian divine thunder flooded the sky. Divine might pressed down from the sky as endless divine thunder gathered around him. The thunder charged towards his figure like chains. Rumble! 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 Countless chains of lightning swept out into the space and circled Dou Zhao's figure. They ignored everything in their path and struck his body. Dou Zhao's power was activated to his limits. However, when the terrifying lightning burst forth, it kept eating away at his flesh. In the heavens above, powerful figures descended. They seemed to be from the same force. They all cultivated the divine power of thunder. It was as though they were various gods in charge of Jiutian divine thunder. They stood above everyone in the sky above. They were all cultivators from the human divine palace. Dou Zhao sensed their power. He realized that this war was different from what he had imagined. The human divine palace, under the rule of the human ancestor, had numerous cultivators from different temples, and their cultivation abilities differed as well. The human divine palace, under the rule of the human ancestor, had numerous cultivators from different temples, and their cultivation abilities differed as well. This group of cultivators specialized in the divine power of thunder. When their divine power exploded, chains of thunder and lightning encircled Dou Zhao's body like dancing snakes. Dou Zhao's body trembled slightly as his spiritual soul was under attack. Boom, boom, boom. Shocking sounds of thunder came out one after another, and a phantom figure manifested behind each cultivator in that group. These phantoms were transformed by thunder and lightning, and they were akin to gods of thunder. At this moment, men and gods stood shoulder to shoulder. What was more terrifying was that these phantoms resonated with one another, so that a truly majestic god appeared in the void, standing between heaven and the earth. Countless chains surrounded his body, and dazzling thunder light burst from the torso of this god. Then this light blasted on Dou Zhao, causing Dou Zhao's spirit soul to tremble. His spiritual soul seemed to come out of the body, facing a true god, as he was bound by chains. Loosen! As Dou Zhao let out a roar, the will of the fighting god was pushed to the limit, striving to surpass the limit. A towering phantom of the fighting god appeared behind him, as the divine power roared fiercely, trying to block the corrosion of that divine power. If he didn't do so, he would be in a dire situation where he would lose his combat effectiveness and be killed in a most miserable fashion. Before the battle, Dou Zhao was pretty confident that he would be invincible no matter who he fought. However, at this moment, not long after the battle started, he encountered trouble already. He realized that the power he met in the human realm was like nothing he had faced before. This was an invasion of this side of the world, and the invading side also had many top figures. Boom! The golden long stick in Dou Zhao's hand exploded with astonishing divine power, with a blinding imperial glory blooming. The will of the fighting god resonated with it, madly urging its power. The divine stick slammed out and swept across an entire corner of the sky. But even as the long stick blasted out, those destructive chains of thunder were still locked onto him, and his long stick, weakening its power. Beams of thunder slammed down, hitting that golden long stick, blocking its power, and pinning Dou Zhao where he was, completely restricting his ability to fight back. At this time, a dull sound came out, faintly accompanied by the sound of dragon chiming, resounding throughout the void. Long Chun was now on the move. He brought the power of the dragon god with him, as he unleashed the golden dragon fist. The fists were turned into purple golden dragons that emerged with angry howls. They attacked the cultivators bathed in the thunder, trying to give Dou Zhao a chance to free himself. Those cultivators glanced at Long Chun, and immediately, countless lightning bolts slammed down on those purple golden dragons, entangling them, thus weakening the dragon's power considerably. Their divine power was directly affected, and this even cut the divine power of the others. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU Buzz. The moment they attacked Long Chun, golden lightning flashed across so fast that they couldn't be sure what it was. Those chains of thunder that lashed out violently could not catch up with their target. Soon after, a golden divine light struck out, splitting the thunder into two. But that golden lightning was wings of feather from the divine wings of the golden-winged rock. It was Jun who attacked, killing one person with one blow. He had cut off the head of some cultivator. His speed was already faster than thunder and lightning, and he had beheaded his opponent under the opponent's thunderous attack. Jun's body was suspended in the void, and the wings behind him bloomed with imperial glory, as if they were cast by divine arms. Every feather was like an extremely sharp divine weapon, and their emergence sobered up the other cultivators immediately. Bang! Another dull sound came out, and the figure of the divine elephant appeared above them. As soon as it stepped into the void, an incomparably terrifying divine power suddenly came down to suppress this corner of the sky. Kill! Dou Zhao roared as he broke free. The long stick in his hand slammed upward against the momentum. At the same time, Long Chun blasted out the dragon god fist, which was domineering and powerful. As Jun's body sailed across the void and turned into lightning, the divine elephant stepped into the void to suppress that corner of the sky and launched its attack as well. All of them bloomed with their own incomparably terrifying divine powers, and each one of them was a near-deity existence. Yi Futian knew that no matter how powerful these 6 major legions were, they were too few in number, especially lacking in advanced combat power at the top. Therefore, in the days before the human realm was about to launch their official invasion, he had deliberately given special training to these 6 major legions. Core members, such as the cultivators who had followed him from the heavenly mandate realm, were directly baptized by the divine power of the micro-heavenly path. Even before that, Yi Futian had helped them reshape their talents, using the divine power to wash their bodies and spiritual souls. The paths they were cultivating now were not the path of the outside world, but the path that belonged to Yi Futian alone. They were like the 8 legions under the throne of the heavenly path. Yi Futian represented the heavenly path of the small world, and they were its direct descendants. Therefore, the combat power of this group of people was awesome, and this was their only advantage. The direct baptism of the divine power of law endowed these top cultivators with massive combat effectiveness. To a certain extent, although the number of the army from the heaven realm was far less than their opponent, this batch of top figures was not any less excellent compared to the other side. On this battlefield, they quickly gained the upper hand, suppressing their opponents. Even though some more cultivators from the other side came as reinforcement, Jun and the others worked in tandem, and soon immolated all the cultivators here. But even so, looking at the entire battlefield at a glance, they were still being outnumbered by the invading army of the human realm. There were simply too many people, and there was a huge gap between the numbers of cultivators involved. The human ancestor launched the power of the human realm to invade, and cultivators continued to emerge wave after wave. Then they pressed onward to Heavenly Imperial City, attacking different locations inside the city. Blood spilled wherever they passed and slaughtered. The sight was extremely horrific to behold. There was a sacred figure clad in a white dress on the battlefield. She was like a tree of life as countless branches and leaves spread out from her body. She possessed an extremely powerful life force. Whenever someone was injured, the divine power of life would pour into the wounded and restore their vitality. Thus lives were revived and flesh grew over the bones. As long as they were not injured by the same, or an even more powerful divine power, they could be rescued and restored to health if they did not die. This was the magnificence of the divine power of life. This woman in white was Xia Qingyuan. She moved through the battlefield constantly saving and resuscitating injured cultivators, but it was useless. With just her alone, it seemed that whatever she was doing was only a drop in the bucket. Moreover, in most cases, those cultivators were being killed outright, so there was no chance of rescuing them. Blood gradually stained her clothes. Xia Qingyuan, who was traveling through the battlefield, felt the fragility of life, and there was a deep sadness in her heart. She was also the princess of Emperor Xia's realm, and she had experienced her share of battles. However, this was the first time she experienced a war of such brutality. It was a battle between millions of cultivators who slaughtered one another in frenzied fights. The scene was simply too terrifying. Buzz! The golden spear pierced through the void and attacked Xia Qingyuan. Someone noticed Xia Qingyuan, who kept resuscitating the injured and restoring their combat effectiveness instantly. Of course, such a person must be killed. Bang! The golden spear came crashing down. But before it hit Xia Qingyuan, it shattered and pulverized. It was smashed by a long rod surrounded by divine flames. Bang! The golden spear came crashing down. But before it hit Xia Qingyuan, it shattered and pulverized. It was smashed by a long rod surrounded by divine flames. Not far above Xia Qingyuan, a ferocious and domineering demon was standing there. It was Zhu Yan the Beast, who had once fought against Yi Futian. Behind him stood the principality of the Demon Ape clan, from the heavenly mandate realm. They spread out and formed a line of defense as a ferocious aura erupted from them. They held long rods in their hands. They were standing in battle formation, as if they were guarding and ensuring Xia Qingyuan's safety. Above the firmament, a group of cultivators dressed in blue was surrounded by golden radiance as they descended from the sky, looking extremely keen. These were the cultivators from the human divine palace. Like golden gods of war, they carried absolute dominance. The golden rays of light sprinkled down as though sharp divine arms came down for the kill, cutting through the void. Zhu Yan the Beast and other demonic cultivators resonated with the energy. He held the long rod and launched it high into the sky, which contained a supreme power. It shattered the void and blocked that group of incoming cultivators. Xia Qingyuan glanced at the battlefield, her robe fluttered. She continued with her task, rushing in another direction as the divine power of life enveloped the boundless space, continuing to heal the wounded. Buzz! Another spatial divine light pierced through the void. It was aimed at Xia Qingyuan. Although Zhu Yan and other great demons had blocked one group of attackers, many had taken notice of Xia Qingyuan by now and wanted to kill her. Quite a few top figures were trying to get to her themselves. The spatial divine light directly penetrated the void and pierced through the bodies of several cultivators. However, it continued moving forward, and its aim never veered from Xia Qingyuan. However, almost at the same moment, a terrifying gigantic palm print blasted down and collided with the divine light in the void. Suddenly, a violent sound came from the space, which could be heard clearly in the surrounding areas. An extremely tyrannical aura permeated, and another group of cultivators appeared behind Xia Qingyuan. These cultivators turned into a battle matrix and moved forward. Until now, they had not made a move. It seemed that their job was to solely protect Xia Qingyuan. Xia Qingyuan was a little surprised by this as well. She turned around to look and recognized the people protecting her from behind. They were the cultivators from the Lost Clan. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. The cultivators of the Lost Clan had been included in the great army of heavenly mandate. These divine arrows traversed heaven and earth continuously and took out many cultivators instantaneously. Those cultivators above the firmament turned into balls of fire and fell from the sky. The sight was astoundingly tragic. However, this turn of events further accentuated the importance of Xia Qingyuan. Cultivators from the human divine palace converged in this direction. They were all determined to take Xia Qingyuan down and kill her. In a moment, a vast battlefield quickly formed around Xia Qingyuan, and this battlefield was full of destructive storms. Above the sky, some divine swords penetrated heaven and earth, turning into a beam of infinite proportion, piercing the sky from top to bottom. The sound of destruction was heard without ceasing, and the cultivators from the heaven realm were directly penetrated by the swords and died instantly. These terrifying divine swords dominated the fate of all beings in this world. passing through many obstacles and aiming directly at Xia Qingyuan. At this time, a full moon appeared, and the moonlight sprinkled down on those divine swords. These divine swords seemed to be sealed in ice as their speed suddenly slowed down. But more than that, many cultivators above the firmament felt an extreme chill. It was the divine power of Yin that had frozen the world. Time and space seemed to stand still under the power of Yin, and those who did not comprehend this divine power were trapped in its power. Buzz! The divine arrows bloomed in the sky, piercing the void. Incomparably radiant divine flames bloomed above the void. The radiant arrows shot by Huang Jioge directly pierced through many cultivators. It seemed as if they had combined the power of the solar and the Yin. Although this divine power was not the divine power of solar, it was not too far behind. In a brief instant, more than 1,000 cultivators fell from the void. It was a most horrific and petrifying sight. Bang! A terrifying divine power erupted as the cultivators from the human divine palace looked down at the area below. They saw a very beautiful woman, who was the embodiment of feminine beauty. Like a goddess in the darkest night, the divine power of Yin bloomed from her. In an instant, she had frozen the space, forcing the space to come to a standstill. This was the goddess of Yuwa divine palace from the Shadow Realm, who had realized the divine power of Yin with the help of Yi Futian. She now unleashed the brilliance of the moon, which transformed into the power of Yin to assist the fight by freezing the space. Fierce battles broke out all around Xia Qingyuan, as many top figures from the human divine palace had gone over there to attack. Even the army from the heavenly court had headed that way to render their support. Fierce battles broke out all around Xia Qingyuan, as many top figures from the human divine palace had gone over there to attack. Even the army from the heavenly court had headed that way to render their support. For a time, people continued to perish in the area around Xia Qingyuan. Xia Qingyuan was in the middle of the battlefield, and many people were guarding her. Her most direct guardians were the army of the Lost Clan. They guarded the outer circle, and did not allow any attackers to get close to her. However, when she saw that the people protecting her kept on dying, without her even having a chance of saving them, Xia Qingyuan just felt a sense of sadness in her heart. She chose not to pursue the imperial realm because she wanted to save more people. But it did not go as she had imagined. Instead, it was because of her that more deaths had occurred. A look of sadness flashed across her eyes, and suddenly the polarities of life and death began revolving around her body, alternating with one another. An iciness now bloomed from her beautiful eyes as endless marks surged around her, all of which were the marks transformed by the power of life and death. As soon as she moved, Xia Qingyuan rushed out of the battlefield, no longer amid the crowd that was meant to protect her. She was also a top cultivator, who had the opportunity to step onto the path of the great emperors. If not for this battle, she would have continued her pursuit of the imperial realm. Kill! When they saw Xia Qingyuan rush out on her own, many cultivators around came from all directions to encircle her. But they saw Xia Qingyuan merely cast a glance at the as countless lights of catastrophe seemed to erupt at the same time, turning into marks of death. Pa pa pa! Sounds of bloodshed were heard continuously. As soon as the marks of death hit their bodies, they would worm into the bodies, turning all traces of life into death in an instant. Death was all but inevitable, as it turned their bodies into pitch-black masses that fell from the sky. In a very brief moment, many cultivators fell from the sky, as if the god of death had descended upon them. Those cultivators who were behind fighting forward had to stop involuntarily after witnessing the shocking sight in front of them. There was a deep fear in their eyes as they fixed their gazes on Xia Qingyuan. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. Previously, Xia Qingyuan was a savior, but now she had become a murderer with completely different prowess. But Xia Qingyuan did not care about the thoughts that ran through their little heads. Her body turned into a bolt of lightning as she smashed into the midst of the cultivators from the human realm. She was surrounded by endless lights of catastrophe, and those lights were like sword marks that carried a terrifying breath of death, which seemed to inflict immediate death as soon as they touched anyone. Watch for those marks around her. Someone in the human realm cautioned the others gravely. Xiaqing Yuan's marks were the marks of the god of death. Anyone unlucky enough to be touched by them would be killed right away, as their life force was being swallowed up in an instant. As soon as they were buried by that will of death, they were already dead men. Those cultivators who had not comprehended divine powers had no way of stopping it. As soon as they were touched, they would die without a doubt. In the distance, Futian was calmly observing everything that happened on the battlefield. All the battles were imprinted in his mind, including the battle in which Xiaqing Yuan was engaged. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. From that spatial passageway, the cultivators from the human realm poured into this world continuously and without ceasing. They were everywhere in the heavenly imperial city and carved a path all the way to the outside of the city. The cultivators from the human realm seemed to be deeply affected by the human ancestor. All of them displayed a strong murderous intent, wanting to destroy the heaven realm and unify the 9 states. Why don't you go back to cultivate? I'll keep an eye over here. A soft and gentle voice spoke up next to Futian. It was Hua Jiyu, who was standing next to him. Very well. Futian nodded in agreement. And with a thought, an avatar suddenly appeared. His person left and departed to the small world. This avatar of his could spy on the outside world, and if anything happened he would know right away. The war broke out and swept through the lands of the 7 realms. Countless cultivators were sucked into this significant battle involving the 7 realms, and no one could escape. The great army of the devil world began to engage the great army of the divine prefecture in an all-out war. The dark world and the empty divine realm armies were also involved in a full-scale war with the world of Buddhism. On the mainland of the dark world, a barefoot monk was walking on the river Styx, walking forward, step by step. At the moment, this dark world seemed relatively peaceful by comparison. On the contrary, the 7 realms were now transformed into hell. This monk's appearance was dignified and solemn, incomparably sacred. The light of Buddha lingered around his body. He walked along the river Styx and moving forward steadily, came to an island. The island was tranquil, as if it was unaware of what was happening in the outside world. The monk stepped onto the island with bare feet. This was the island of light in the dark world. There was no strife and no hatred here. Futian had come here once. The monk saw the virgin who resided on the island. She was teaching the children quietly as always, as if the disputes on the outside world had nothing to do with her. The children were a little curious when they saw a strange monk here, and could not help but look at the monk. The monk smiled at them, and watched the woman quietly. What business does the master have here? The woman finally asked the monk, unable to hold back any longer. You should know me. The monk saluted, his hands clasped together. Surely the master jests. We have never met before. How could I know you? The woman responded calmly. Amitba. The monk put his hands together and said to the woman, You desired a pure land with absolute light. But where there are people, it is doomed to rife with disputes. Even Buddhist holy lands cannot be spared. So how can there be such a thing as an absolute pure land? This here is the pure land, said the woman. No need to deceive yourself, said the monk, as he waved his hands. Suddenly imageries appeared upon the lake. These imageries were of wars on the lands of the 7 realms. There was destruction everywhere, countless people perishing. Destruction will only bring darkness, not light, the monk continued. Is the current situation really the result that you wanted? Master has mistaken me for someone else. There was a sign of disturbance in the woman's eyes when she saw those images. I can see your fate, the monk said suddenly. The woman was stunned by his claim. Then, she looked at the monk curiously. Tell me. Death is salvation, the monk replied. Salvation? The woman looked at the monk and continued. I don't need salvation. The master best go elsewhere. Amitba. The monk folded his hands together and said to the woman, Even as the master of darkness, there is still light in your heart. There is no absolute darkness nor absolute light in this world. No matter the destructions or how it is reborn, the world is still the same, and only the law can change the world, not destruction and death. The woman's eyes sharpened as she stared at the monk and said, Can Omniscient really see the future? At this moment, her temperament suddenly became majestic, It contained an incomparably mighty solemnity. The monk in front of her was none other than the Buddha of destiny. The great paths are connected, and there is not much difference as they exist in the world, said the Buddha of destiny. If you want to find the person who led you into darkness, the answer lies in the human realm. In the dark world was a passageway that connected to the human realm. In the dark world was a passageway that connected to the human realm. The human realm was known as the most perfect realm after the collapse of the heavenly path. Under the governance of the human ancestor, the human realm had been peaceful and stable, and its cultivators likewise were strong in strength. But now cultivators from the human realm had flooded into the heaven realm and launched a war of invasion. At this time, in a city in the human realm, a beautiful woman appeared. This woman was dressed in white and looked pristine from head to toe. It was the woman from the dark world. The words of the Buddha of destiny had touched upon the answer she had always wanted to know. Therefore, she came to the human realm. As soon as her thoughts moved, countless imageries from the city below came rushing into her mind. The human realm instigated the invasion of the heaven realm and ignited the fire of war in the heaven realm. However, this city inside the human realm was peaceful and quiet, forming a stark contrast with the chaos outside. Inside a particular clan, a few people were talking. A young woman asked, "Master, how is the war outside progressing? Have we taken the heaven realm and the divine prefecture?" The human ancestor led the powers of the entire human realm to launch the battle of the 7 realms. How could he fail? Victory is the only outcome for this war. Her master responded with strong conviction in his voice. It sounded like whatever the human ancestor intended to do would indeed become a reality. The young woman nodded slightly, but then she seemed to have remembered something, as she continued. It's just that in this unprecedented warfare, which the human realm started, won't there be a lot of cultivators who perish because of it? And will there be a lot of innocent lives lost in the heaven realm and the divine prefecture because of it? Silly girl, her master laughed in a low voice. The human ancestor fought for the justice of the world, and naturally, there will be collateral damage. As long as the heaven realm and the divine prefecture are taken, the 7 realms will be united, and the world will thrive under the established order by the human ancestor. Then they will all thank the human ancestor, who will lead the world to the glory of your. This is the great path. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. The woman nodded lightly, as if she was suddenly enlightened. She said with a smile, "The human ancestor fought to save all living beings in the 7 realms. When the 7 realms are unified, everyone in the world will believe in the human ancestor. Unfortunately, my cultivation is still not advanced enough, or else I will also join the battle and go to the heaven realm to fight." Just as they were talking amongst themselves, suddenly another person appeared next to them. The two of them were startled as they fixed their attention on the woman, who appeared out of nowhere. They saw the woman frown slightly, a puzzled look on her face, as she focused her attention on this teacher and student duo who were talking to each other. Heaven and the divine prefecture each have its own established order already, especially the divine prefecture. Under the governance of Donghuang the Great, the divine prefecture is peaceful and prosperous, a place where many in the world had gone to seek the way and cultivate. Why do they need to be saved? The woman from the light path looked at the two. She continued, "They already have their own orders. The invasion of the human realm has devastated the lives of many. How can this constitute justice?" "Who are you?" The elder did not answer her question right away, but stared at the woman with heightened alert as he posed the question. "Answer my question," the woman said coldly as invisible coercion enveloped the other two, making them both feel a suffocating feeling. The young woman responded, "Yi Futian of the heaven realm and Donghuang the Great of the divine prefecture were weaving a conspiracy, and it will probably put the world in jeopardy. The human ancestor took charge to deal out justice and restore the order of the world. Naturally, this is the justice of the world." When she heard this answer, the woman in white felt a little bewildered. The other was not at a tender age of ignorance, and she was no beginner in cultivation. Yet, how could she say such unreasonable things? So the human ancestor must be in the right? she asked. The human ancestor is in the right, the woman responded. Are you disrespecting the human ancestor? The old man's eyes sharpened. Seeing the reaction of these two, the woman disappeared immediately and left as if she knew that it was useless to talk anymore with them. They were deeply entrenched in their belief, and it was impossible to persuade them otherwise. Somewhere else, in a major clan in the city, many cultivators were participating in a ritual. Their clan leader had died in the Battle of the Heaven Realm. The whole clan was grieving. Our clan leader answered the call of the human ancestor to fight for the order of the world, the unification of the 7 realms, and for justice. Although he is no more, his spirit will live on forever. This solemn pronouncement resounded throughout the crowd. Everyone looked on gravely and knelt to pay their final respect to the dead. They were the descendants of the ones who died in battle, but they felt honored. It was as if they were proud of those who died fighting for such causes. I want to go to the Heaven Realm to fight in the war as well, someone said, and everyone else looked at the speaker. A man asked, Your cultivation is not yet up to par. Don't you want to cultivate for a while longer before you go? I don't want to miss it, and I'm afraid such an opportunity will not be there in the future, the man replied, with a slight fanaticism in his voice. All these imageries were deeply imprinted in the woman's mind. Her divine consciousness covered the entire city, and she found that similar sights were happening everywhere. Some were even more outlandish than this. Cultivators of the human realm had this deep-rooted belief that this was a fight for the justice of the world and to restore the order of the world. The human ancestor was their absolute belief, which could not be shaken. Even if their loved ones died in the battle, their hatred was targeted squarely at the heaven realm, and they did not feel much sadness. The woman's face changed, and the calmness and tranquility she had moments ago were gone. At this moment, countless images appeared in her mind, and the past came alive vividly before her eyes. She remembered that in her cultivation journey, she too had gone astray and sunken into darkness when she was young. She had forsaken everything and was trapped in demonic barriers. In the name of cultivation, she lost her humanity. She would never forget the expressions on the faces of her parents when they perished at her hands. However, she seemed to be possessed at that time, continuing her walk deeper on the road of darkness and turning into the devil herself. She had seen all the darkness in the world and experienced hell on earth, until one day, she became the master of darkness. All those things in the human realm now had a familiar feel, but even she knew that these cultivators were not under direct control. She disappeared, and she embarked to other places in the human realm. She found that it was the same everywhere. She had even seen something more exaggerated, like those cultivators from the human realm who believed in justice. They regarded invasion and killing as the right thing to do, and as their life's mission. Human ancestor. At this time, the woman stood in the void, and she could only feel a biting iciness all over her body. In those quiet eyes, there was only darkness at this moment, and an extremely palpable murderous intent. She had never liked the human ancestor. She thought that the human ancestor was hypocritical and pretended to be virtuous. From the human ancestor, she could see the shadow of her own master. At this moment, she had a feeling that she might be right, and that it was not the shadow of her master. It was possible that human ancestor could be her master. The cultivator who brought him into the darkness was very likely the incarnation of the human ancestor. And only the human ancestor had such abilities. Crack. With her fists clenched, a frantic will of destruction was about to burst from her. But it was suppressed by her. It was an unforgettable hatred that she was feeling right now. The human ancestor was able to influence the thoughts and emotions of all the cultivators in the entire human realm. Inside the human divine palace, there was peace at the moment. There were no conflicts or disputes. Everything appeared like a place out of this world that was exceptionally tranquility. Inside the human divine palace, there was peace at the moment. There were no conflicts or disputes. Everything appeared like a place out of this world that was exceptionally tranquility. In front of a palace, the human ancestor was chatting with a child. The scene was peaceful, in stark contrast to the war currently taking place in the 7 realms. At this time, a strong fluctuation came from the sky. The human ancestor raised his head to look up before seeing a divine light descended upon the human divine palace. And someone landed directly in front of him. Immediately, the human ancestor stepped aside and bowed in reverence. A handsome and extraordinary young man appeared where the divine light fell. His body gradually solidified, and he emerged from that elusive shadow. It seemed as if he was not made of flesh and blood at all. The child looked at the young man curiously and seemed a little puzzled by him. He looked at the human ancestor and wondered why he was so respectful to this young man. Wasn't the human ancestor the master of the human realm? Master! The human ancestor bowed and called out, behaving extremely respectfully. It appeared as if the young man was the true master behind the scenes in the human realm. Sir, who are you? The child looked at the young man and asked. The young man's body gradually materialized, and he looked at the child with a gentle smile. He said, I am the human ancestor. Human ancestor. The child looked at him, then at the other human ancestor next to him, asking doubtfully, then who is he? Please keep reading on Wuxia World. He is also the human ancestor. The young man responded. The human ancestor is not just one person. There are many human ancestors. It is because of this that we are considered the ancestors of mankind. The child scratched his head, still puzzled. He had no idea what the young man was talking about. The young man walked up to the child and rubbed his head. He stooped down and said with a smile, When I was younger, I was just like you, an ordinary person who suffered my share of bullying. That was the era when divine power ruled, when the gods controlled the order of the world. Mortals were like insects, and they could only look up to the gods. In the age of the gods held supreme power. When the gods fought, even the heavens were shattered and many died. My parents, wife, and children were among the unfortunate who died. But even as they died, they did not get so much as a look of sympathy, because the gods cared not for the deaths of mortals. In front of the gods, mortals are nothing but ants on the ground. No one would apologize to ants, nor would they have to pay for what they did to the ants. But fortunately, the gods died when the apocalyptic catastrophe destroyed all the gods. It was possible even for the gods who were high above to die. It was an era full of fear and hatred. It was the worst of eras, but it was also the best. When all the gods fell, everything in the world would be remade. Without the gods, mortals become the focus of the world. The young man spoke calmly, as if he was telling a story from the ancient past. Gods are nothing. They are just mortals who control powerful forces. They can die, and they have emotions just like everyone else. They think like mortals, so mortals are gods, and everyone can become a god. Will I be able to do that too? The child asked innocently, looking at the young man with some longing in his eyes. Of course, the young man nodded. God and man, the divine and the mortals are one and the same. Having said that, he stretched out his hand with a drop of water in his palm and asked, What is this? A drop of water, the child replied. The water droplet floated into the air, and in that tiny water droplet, a terrifying force was being born, and the water droplet began to spin. It then flew through the air, and a building in the distance instantly collapsed and shattered, turning into a pile of dust. Behold, even a drop of water can have incredible power, but its essence is still of water. The young man looked at the child and continued, It's the same with people. There is no essential difference between mortals and gods, as they are the same. Do you understand? The child shook his head. The young man smiled as he rubbed the child's head again. He stood up and continued, It's all right if you don't understand. Everyone in the world is stupid and ignorant, because they are controlled by their emotions and desires, and can never escape from their grip. This is the reason why this world needs to be remade. But how? The child asked curiously, while his eyes were still fastened on the young man. His eyes were innocent. The young man looked down at him with a smile. Create a world of the gods. The world of the gods, the child murmured. What kind of a world is the world of the gods? But in the next moment he stopped thinking. The young man's body turned into an intense light, and shot directly into his body. The child's eyes revealed a pained look, and his face twisted. He looked at the elusive figure in front of him, and opened his mouth as if shouting something out. There was despair and fear in his eyes as tears flooded out from them. He reached out his trembling hands, trying to grab something, but ultimately, he was unable to. Soon, the divine light submerged his body, and the look in the child's eyes changed. It was freezing, with a sense of contempt that disregarded everything, as if there was no emotion. Afterward, he flexed his arm a bit, looked at it, and appeared satisfied. "It's all right," he said in a low voice. "Congratulations, master," said the human ancestor next to him. "I'm the same as you," said the child. Immediately the human ancestor understood what he meant and nodded. The human divine palace was peaceful and harmonious at the moment, but the war that raged in the 7 realms was becoming more fierce. This war had swept through the 7 realms at an incredible speed. At this time, there was still a steady stream of cultivators who traveled across domains to participate in the war. In the Western world of Buddhism, the battles were incredibly fierce. The combined forces of the Dark World and the empty divine realm swept through the Buddhist world. These battles were extremely costly and stained the Buddhist Pure Land with blood. The sound of chanting Buddhist scriptures could be heard everywhere on the land, as if they were trying to redeem the dead. However, just when the war had reached a crescendo, a shocking turn of events occurred. The army of the Dark World that invaded the Buddhist world suddenly stopped fighting against Buddhist cultivators. They now turned their attention to the cultivators of the empty divine realm, and the sudden slaughter caught these cultivators off guard. They had no chance to react to what was happening to them. Even the cultivators from the Buddhist world were completely stunned and did not understand what was happening. Why would the Dark World and the empty divine realm suddenly turn on one another and start infighting? The Buddhist cultivators couldn't react for a while. They were content to stand on the sidelines, letting the others fight amongst themselves. It didn't take long for the battlefield in the Western world of Buddhism to undergo earth-shattering changes. Due to the internal war between the Dark World and the empty divine realm, Buddhist cultivators began the sweep to cut down the power of these two worlds. So the war now turned into a chaotic 3-way battle. However, in the main battlefield of Buddhism, the Western world of Buddhism still held the absolute advantage, causing the cultivators of the other 2 worlds to suffer steady defeats and be forced into retreat. There was no doubt that if things continued this way, the Dark World and the empty divine realm would eventually be beaten off of the battlefield entirely. Because of this, the evil emperor himself went to the Dark Divine Mountain. The evil emperor came to the Dark Court to see the Dark Sovereign. The evil emperor came to the Dark Court to see the Dark Sovereign. "Why betray me?" the evil emperor asked the Dark Sovereign unceremoniously. "Evil emperor, do you know the truth about the human ancestor?" asked the Dark Sovereign. "That's not important." The evil emperor brushed the question aside nonchalantly. "No, it is essential." The Dark Sovereign looked at the evil emperor as she took off her mask, revealing an indifferent face. The evil emperor did not seem surprised, as his expression remained as it was before. "Do you know how I became the Lord of Darkness?" The Dark Sovereign looked at the evil emperor and continued. "Once, I was just like so many others, simple-minded and ordinary. Until one person appeared and everything changed. He taught me cultivation and led me on the path of darkness. He let me experience the cruelest and darkest side of this world. So step by step, I came to be the master of the Dark World today. Because of this, you think the whole world is dark, and you wanted nothing but destruction," said the evil emperor. "Yes," the Dark Sovereign nodded. "In this turbid dark world, the dawn will only appear after destruction." "Understandable," the evil emperor nodded. "The dragon slayer will eventually become the evil dragon. Perhaps the teacher who taught you was the same. He has also experienced darkness, tried to change the world, and led you to darkness." "Very possibly, he is the human ancestor," the Dark Sovereign said to the evil emperor. The evil emperor was silent for a moment when he heard those words, but then said, "Everything in the world will eventually settle and cannot be changed. Now he also seems to have realized your wish, which is to bring darkness to the world. Please keep reading on Wuxia world. You know that is not what I want." "What is it that you want then?" the evil emperor asked her. The Dark Sovereign was stunned by this question. What was it that she wanted? Before, her goal was always clear and firm: shroud the earth with darkness. But now, why was she unsure? You want revenge? The evil emperor looked at her. Because you discovered the truth. The belief that you held for so long began to wobble. At this time, even you have no idea what you want to do. If you continue with your previous goal, then in a way, you have complied with the wishes of your enemy. So you are uncertain now. You are struggling inside. The Dark Sovereign looked at the evil emperor in the eyes, and those evil eyes seemed to see through the truth. She nodded and said, yes. Indeed, she was struggling. Too late. The evil emperor looked at the Dark Sovereign and said, everything has settled, and everything in the world has been predetermined. Since it can't be changed, why not go along with it? Is this still the evil lord of the empty divine realm? The Dark Sovereign looked at the evil emperor and asked, and you? Are you still the Lord of Darkness who wants to destroy the world? The evil emperor responded. The two stared at each other as invisible coercion enveloped the world. All the cultivators of the entire Dark Court could feel that suffocating pressure. In the era when the heavenly path collapsed, the gods fell, as well as so many people in the world. Now the era seems to be repeating itself, and no one can predict what will happen in the future. However, whether it is the cultivator of the dark world or the empty divine realm, whether it is you or me, we all have the right to live. The evil emperor continued while fixing his attention on the Dark Sovereign. His idea was simple enough. He wanted to live and continue to carry on in this dangerous era. He also hoped to see more of empty divine realms cultivators survive. The balance had been broken, and war was unavoidable, so he must follow the trend of things as they were. Only by surviving could he have the chance to get to a higher level, until he was strong enough to pose a threat to the human ancestor. But for now he had no way of fighting back. As one of the 6 emperors in the world, he was a cultivator standing at the top. But even he had to face reality. When the gods returned and descended, he knew that the era of the 6 emperors was history. So, the Dark Sovereign asked as she looked at the evil emperor. Your order caused the empty divine realm to lose more cultivators, and I won't risk anyone else in today's battle, the evil emperor said. He disappeared from where he was. The Dark Sovereign glanced upward, then stepped out and headed towards the void. After a while, heaven and earth roared in the sky above the Dark Court, and the void seemed to be broken. A terrifying divine power made the hell in the dark world tremble, and the sea of the underworld scream. In the human realm, on all the continents, countless cultivators raised their heads. Above the firmament, they saw a gigantic face, and it was the face of the human ancestor. Your Majesty, the human ancestor. Countless cultivators bowed and saluted him, displaying a fervent fanaticism. The face of the human ancestor looked at the people of the world and said, I've been waiting for this day for a very long time, but others stopped me. Now I'm finally back. Before this, the people of the human realm have already gone to the 7 realms, leading the fight for justice, fighting for the unification of the 7 realms. Now it is your turn. When his words fell, divine light descended from the firmament, and countless divine lights fell on the people. At this moment, all the cultivators in the human realm were bathed in that divine light, and their eyes became even more frenzied, with an indescribable and utmost reverence. More importantly, they also felt the power, which seemed to augment the capabilities they had already possessed. The divine light that descended strengthened them. This will be a new era, the era of the gods. After the unification of the 7 realms, I will bless the world, and let my people have the opportunity to become gods. At this moment, even as mortals, you shall stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods, the human ancestor continued. No one doubted his words at this moment, as they had a deep conviction of their belief. All of them were shouting and cheering. Boom, boom, boom. Heaven and earth trembled, and an even more terrifying divine power descended and fell on the people. Suddenly, they felt that they were the incarnation of gods. Just as the human ancestor told them, as mortals, they were standing shoulder to shoulder with the gods. Many spatial passageways appeared, leading to different places. Go forth. The 7 realms and the original realm will be ours, This is the best of times. The human ancestor's voice resounded throughout the world, full of fervent fanaticism. Countless cultivators in the human realm set off on their missions, traveling through the spatial passageways, and embarked to other worlds. In the Devil world, the Devil Emperor stood on the top of the Devil Imperial Palace, and his eyes seemed to have penetrated the void, seeing everything that was happening in the human realm. What he saw was so powerful and shocking that even the heart of the Devil Emperor trembled. "This is madness," the Devil Emperor spat. The human ancestor had gained direct control of the people in the world. He was using these people to reshape the world order. Let them rule the world, so that the whole world would operate only by his will. In the land of the Divine Prefecture, in Donghuang Imperial Palace, Donghuang the Great also saw what was happening in the human realm, and he was equally shocked. He too exclaimed, "The human ancestor has gone mad." In the world of Buddhism, in the endless nothingness, a sound of Buddha was heard. It was the voice of the Buddha. The human ancestor was no longer just trying to replace the heavenly path. Yi Futian hovered in the void of the heavenly realm, while watching the projections of the live happenings from all realms that appeared around him. Yi Futian hovered in the void of the heavenly realm, while watching the projections of the live happenings from all realms that appeared around him. The cultivators of the human realm unleashed their worldwide conquest and began to slaughter the people from other realms indiscriminately. Mountains of corpses could be seen everywhere. It was a living hell. The scariest part of it all would be the cultivators of the human realm, who looked like they were possessed. None of them were in their right minds. It was as if they were born to kill. Moreover, their strength was greatly enhanced, making them an unstoppable bunch of mindless killing machines. Amitabha, the Buddha of Destiny, who stood beside Yi Futian, started reciting Buddhist sutra. He put his hands together after witnessing the violent and gory scenes. "Are you able to peer into the fate of our future?" Yi Futian asked the Buddha of Destiny. "Even I could not peep into your future destiny, Your Highness. There is no way to prevent this predestined fate from taking place. Furthermore, the elite cultivators in this world will have to go through great tribulation. Unfortunately, I cannot perceive what fate has in store for us beyond this point, due to the limitation of my cultivation." The Buddha of Destiny put his palms together and answered. Although he could not look into Yi Futian's destiny, he could tell that the latter would have to face an arduous ordeal. "Is there no one that can stop the human ancestor?" Yi Futian murmured. The human ancestor had been controlling the cultivators of the human realm to conquer the whole world. But the former still could not figure out what was the ultimate goal of the latter. The Buddha of Destiny remained taciturn. The human ancestor was the most mysterious and powerful existence since the ancient days. Even though they could alter the flow of time, they still could not catch up to the tier of his cultivation and make up for the difference between their cultivation duration. Yi Futian enveloped the entire domain of the heavenly realm with his divine consciousness. Following that, he noticed many combatants in danger, and the 2 legions he had personally trained had lost many of their forces. Even Xiaqing Yuan Do Zhao and the rest were in dire situations. Although they were powerful cultivators, they began to show signs of fatigue after continuously fighting for days. There were constant reinforcements from the human realm, and none of them acted like themselves. This was never a fair battle from the start. The human ancestor had manipulated the war by controlling the minds of the cultivators of the human realm. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. After watching the devastating scenes from the projections, Yi Futian knew that he could not allow things to go on like this. If he were to be led by the human ancestor's pace, it would spell doom for the living beings in the world. It was something that they could never afford to see. Bang! Yi Futian manifested a terrifying god's might that covered the entire atmosphere of the heavenly realm with a thought. At once, everyone lifted their heads to look at the sky. The cultivators of the human realm furrowed their brows while the combatants of the heavenly realm, who looked exhausted and demoralized, felt a huge relief because their ruler, the heavenly emperor, began to interfere with the war. If the war continued any longer, all of them would be annihilated. Attention, you who have invaded the heaven realm. The human ancestor refined the human realm and controlled you to occupy the heavenly realm and massacre its people. But I hereby announce that there shall be no killing and battling in the heavenly realm from this moment onward. Everyone must obey the order for a ceasefire. Offenders will be subject to immediate execution. Yi Futian's voice resounded through the whole heavenly realm. Naturally, the cultivators of the human realm would never listen to his words, as they would only obey the will of the human ancestor to fight for the cause of their justice and unite the 7 realms. From their point of view, Yi Futian had said that because he was afraid of losing, now that he was on the losing end of the battle, the only way to turn the tide would be his intervention. Kill them. Some cultivators of the human realm in the heavenly imperial city paid no heed to Yi Futian's warning and continued their killing spree. They could not think straight, since they were controlled by their emotions. They were trapped in their obstinacy, while some even lost themselves to the human ancestors' mind control. Boom! A tribulation of destruction rained from the sky, while an overpowering god's might permeated the air. All those who came into contact with it were completely erased. In that instant, countless lights of catastrophe shot down from the sky and killed numerous cultivators of the human realm. Everyone retreat from the battlefield at once, Yi Futian ordered. He was afraid that the cultivators of the human realm might take revenge on him, since he had broken the unspoken rule of the cultivation world. Hence, he commanded the combatants of the heavenly realm to pull back. Rumble! An ominous sound could be heard reverberating in the air. The space passage that connected from the human realm enlarged even more. The border between the 2 realms seemed to have vanished. There would no longer be a distinction between the heaven realm and the human realm. A destructive divine thunder, also called the chaos true thunder, was fired from the human realm to the heavenly realm at a scale that could exterminate every cultivator in that realm. At the same time, multiple silhouettes of the gods showed up at the connecting point between the 2 realms, exuding a spine-chilling aura. Nevertheless, many figures of the great emperors appeared beside Yi Futian. It was the rivalry between the newly emerged great emperors of the heavenly realm and the old gods from ancient times. Charge! The people of the human realm gasped in astonishment. Instantaneously, the silhouettes of the gods vanished from sight when they crossed over the heaven realm, appearing again at different locations in the next instant. Since Yi Futian had broken the unspoken rules, there would be no law and restriction anymore. What happened next would be a genocide. Figures of ancient gods headed toward multiple points at high speed, turning into flashes of lightning as they moved. The group of the great emperors, beside Yi Futian, made a move the moment the bodies of the ancient gods glowed up. Aiming at their targets, the former disappeared into thin air right after they accelerated at the same speed. The ancient god of wind had the fastest speed among all. A storm would be stirred up whenever he moved, destroying everything in his path. As a result, every building that he passed by was utterly demolished, killing all the cultivators who were taking shelter inside in the process. After accelerating his speed to the limits, he traversed the city in a flash, forming a crevasse in the middle of it. Following that, a bolt of lightning was closing in on him from behind at a breakneck speed. It looked like a beam of light that traveled across the space and aimed directly at him. The god of wind knitted his brows together when he noticed someone was hot on his heels. With a thought, he created devastating wind blades with his divine power and turned them into a tornado that tore open the void. Immediately, the calamitous cyclone rushed toward that light, turning everything in its path into clouds of dust. That light figure headed into the twister, since they could not evade it while moving at such speed. Everything happened within a short moment that was faster than the speed of lightning. Whiz! That light figure passed through the cyclone and came out from the other side, flying toward the god of wind. At the sight of it, the expression of the latter turned glum and transformed himself into an intangible wind current, further increasing his moving speed. Just then, a glaring light that covered a large extent of the boundless space radiated the atmosphere before it. The light pierced through everything it touched. A groan could be heard after a while, and the light immediately launched itself in the direction of the sound. In the direction where the divine light beamed, someone let out a shriek of agony. Immediately after, the god of wind showed himself. However, the silhouette of his gallant form was pierced through by countless rays of light, filling his body with innumerable holes of light. The glaring light gleamed across a vast distance, brimming the void with its brightness. Next, his body was crumbled into uncountable pieces and gradually receded from view. While a disembodied phantom attempted to flee from the scene, the light figure shot a light beam at the former to finish it off, giving no chance to any of its remnants to survive. After a while, the silhouette of Chun-Yi appeared in that place. Turning his eyes in another direction, he dashed forward to another destination. Long ago, he had received the inheritance of the Bright Temple, and his perseverance in cultivation finally made him a genuine god of light. While Chun-Yi was going around exterminating the enemies, the great emperors beside Yi Futian sealed up the heavenly imperial city. Standing in different locations, they unleashed the divine domain of the Great Path to prevent the gods of the human realm from killing indiscriminately. While Chun-Yi was going around exterminating the enemies, the great emperors beside Yi Futian sealed up the heavenly imperial city. Standing in different locations, they unleashed the divine domain of the Great Path to prevent the gods of the human realm from killing indiscriminately. In another place, Yi Wuxian, Yaya, and Swordmaster of Lihan moved together in a group to set up a sword matrix. At that time, one of the gods entered the sword matrix and threw a domineering punch that broke the void, smashing the sword will into pieces. Fang Xiyuan held a golden divine spear in his hand in another scene. It was emanating an overwhelming divine power of the source of the Great Path. The divine artifact held in the hands of the core members of the great emperors were treasures born in the heavenly path world of Yi Futian. In the opposite direction, a god with a burly figure walked toward them with a black overlord spear that was brimming with divine power in his hand. The void would tremble with every step he took. Bang! After he launched an attack, the overlord spear tore the fabric of space-time and pierced through the atmosphere, firing at Fang Xiyuan. In response, the latter intensified his intent of battle and poured his divine power into the golden divine spear. Thrusting his weapon forward, it turned into a bolt of magnificent golden lightning that cracked the air in the atmosphere, aiming at the opponent. At the collision of the two spears, the entire scenery turned into what seemed like an apocalypse, destroying everything in the atmosphere nearby. Fang Xiyuan was sent flying backward by the impact. Right then, he turned around and headed into the sky, getting further away from the battlefield. After all, this place could not handle having so many great emperors clashing with each other at the same time. Wasting no time, his opponent tailed him and headed to the sky. The father and son duo, Blind Tai and Tai Tu, stood together in another location. They both unleashed their intimidating divine powers, while holding hammers of Tianshan that were packed with frightening energies in their hands to watch over that place. After noticing an approaching god, they swung their divine hammers and battled their enemy. A war between the gods broke out in different locations simultaneously. The size of their war zone was extremely vast. In the blink of an eye, they expanded it from the scale of the heavenly imperial city to the entire continent. Even though it was impossible for the great emperors of the heavenly realm to lock their enemies within a small space, stalling or luring the latter from the battlefield, so that their fights would not affect the common people was manageable. Fortunately, their opponents did not deliberately attack the weaker cultivators. Please keep reading 0NMYB0X and 0VL. C0M. After all, most of them were ancient Tianshan, so they were somewhat reluctant to do so. The War of the Gods erupted in multiple locations at the same time. Rumble, a violent resonant sound, caught the attention of many cultivators. After lowering their heads, they noticed that the heavenly imperial city was moving. They were taken aback by the sight of it. No, it's not just the heavenly imperial city, but the whole continent. A person was stunned after realizing the fact. Those who witnessed the bizarre sighting remained in the same spot, as they watched the heavenly imperial city getting further away from them. The cultivators who remained in the city didn't dare to fly, so they just let themselves be dragged away alongside the entire city. Shortly after, they noticed that the war zone was gradually moving further from them. It looked like someone was pulling the whole continent. Eventually, the heavenly imperial city became small in the eyes of the other cultivators. The whole continent was moved away to a far-off distance from the battlefield. Soon after, they caught sight of a massive phantasm of a divine dragon that occupied a huge part of the sky, pulling the entire continent away until it became minuscule. After that, the silhouette of the divine dragon moved toward the war zone in the sky steadily. A while later, they spotted a stunning woman at the scene, and she was none other than Donghuang Diyuan. She was the one who summoned the ancestral dragon to pull the continent away from the war zone. With that, there were only the gods left on the battleground. In short, it had become the battlefield of the gods. Whoosh! A silhouette took a step forward and turned into a flash of lightning while staring down at Donghuang Diyuan with a sharp look. After waving his hand, a sky river of swords manifested in the firmament and split open the atmosphere, slashing at Donghuang Diyuan at lightning speed. If this slash were to hit Donghuang Diyuan, she might not get away unscathed, although she had reached the Great Emperor plan for years already. After all, the one who launched the attack was Eternal Sword Lord, a great emperor from ancient times. Right before the slashes of the swords were about to reach Donghuang Diyuan, a figure suddenly showed up in front of her and stretched his hand to touch the eternal swords with his finger. Immediately, the entire swords were shattered. It slowly dissipated and reduced to nothingness. "Father," Donghuang Diyuan murmured. The person who appeared before her in the nick of time was Donghuang the Great. Turning to look at the Eternal Sword Lord, he criticized, "You were one of those who had stood at the pinnacle of cultivation since ancient times. I couldn't believe someone of your status would do something as disgraceful as trying to kill a junior. Everyone starts their cultivation journey at different timing. There is no such thing as seniority on the battlefield." After the Eternal Sword Lord finished speaking, the whole atmosphere turned into the Eternal Sword Domain, where countless swords were fired at Donghuang the Great. "Get out of here first," Donghuang the Great whispered to Donghuang Diyuan. Wasting no time, she fled from the battleground with the divine power of revelation, shielding her, so that the sword domain could not harm her. At that time, Donghuang the Great's divine power of revelation had grown even more powerful. Within the revelation divine domain, it would not allow any other divine powers to exist. Hence, most of the swords were utterly disintegrated. After the revelation would be the void. Needless to say, Donghuang the Great had once again improved his cultivation to the next level. Clang! Numerous swords hovered around the atmosphere with the control of Donghuang the Great's thought. The moment the heaven-punishing sword will surged its energy, all of the swords were launched at the Eternal Sword Lord, shattering everything in their paths and pulverizing all things to nothingness. It was as if no other power could stand against his heaven-punishing sword. "You've improved a lot," the Eternal Sword Lord commented after sensing the sword will. Compared to the last time they had clashed with each other, Donghuang the Great's divine power had enhanced even further. That was indeed a phenomenal speed of improvement. "I respect you as one of the great emperors whose name was known by many during ancient times. If you were to leave this battlefield at once, I would not lay a hand on you," Donghuang the Great notified with a tone brimming with absolute confidence, even though he was talking to an ancient super great emperor. It was only natural since he was one of the strongest beings in the world at that time. Although the future generations might never know the golden age of the ancient emperors, I can finally see it again today, the Eternal Sword Lord remarked solemnly as his sword will gradually intensified. "Quit presuming on your seniority," Donghuang the Great rebuked savagely. This was a fight between the super great emperor of ancient times and the apex great emperor of the current age. Rumble! A divine power of destruction rained down from the sky, causing many to raise their heads and check out the situation above them, only to find an older man hovering there. That man was exploding a powerful aura, as if he was a god who had existed since ancient times, the primogenitor of all sentient beings, whose very presence would cause everyone to kneel and worship him. A loud sound could be heard from the sky, The sound came from a massive maroon ancient bell that revolved ceaselessly. It gradually turned into bolts of maroon lightning that occupied the entire firmament, permeating the boundless void as they were rained down. A loud sound could be heard from the sky. The sound came from a massive maroon ancient bell that revolved ceaselessly. It gradually turned into bolts of maroon lightning that occupied the entire firmament, permeating the boundless void as they were rained down. Bell sounds were produced from each flash of the maroon lightning that could destroy everyone's spiritual soul. At that, a light of Buddha glared brilliantly. A silhouette with a magnificent golden frame suddenly appeared beneath the primary emperor. That figure was gleaming golden divine light, the light of Buddha. The light covered the whole atmosphere with its brightness. There was a gigantic halo blocking the sky. Runes of Buddhism could be seen above the halo. Each of the runes was brimmed with the great power of Buddhism. Within the runes, an incorporeal phantasm of Buddha was awakened as the sound of Buddha resounded in the atmosphere, clashing with the bolts of maroon lightning. Bam! Bang! Boom! All the apocalyptic attacks were completely nullified. Lifting his head to look at the sky, Futian could see the Buddha leading his legion of Buddhist cultivators as reinforcements. "What are you waiting for?" Futian asked in a deep voice. There were several great emperors who stood behind him. Their blood ran cold upon hearing his question. Those people were Futian the Great and his men. Truthfully, they did not see eye to eye with Futian since they were once enemies. However, they had no choice but to submit to his authority at that moment. Following that, they finally headed toward the battlefield of the gods. After glancing around the battleground, Futian the Great caught sight of a figure of a child. Although that child seemed to be not more than 10 years old, the aura that he exuded was rather formidable. Nevertheless, picking a kid as an opponent would be better on the battlefield full of gods. Immediately after he moved forward, he unleashed an emperor's might toward the child who walked out from the human ancestor's side. Activating the divine power of Futian, he launched a colossal great palm that was covering a big part of the sky at the kid, intending to take out the latter. However, that child raised his head to gaze at Futian the Great with an indifferent and derisive look. The latter furrowed his brows at the sight of the kid's disdainful demeanor. Right then he instinctively sensed a dangerous aura. Within a split second, that child made a move and turned into a bolt of lightning. Then, he threw a punch with his tiny fist that seemed feeble at first, but penetrated the Futian great palm with little effort, and accelerated toward his opponent at an incredible speed. Please keep reading on MYB0XN0VL. Calm colors drained from the face of Futian the Great. To think that the Futian great palm, that was generated with his divine power, was effortlessly destroyed. Just how powerful was the force from that punch? With that, Futian the Great hastily withdrew from the scene. Nevertheless, that child turned himself into a flash of lightning and moved at full tilt. It was so fast that the former could not get away from the latter. In the next moment, that child raised his fist and hurled a punch at his enemy. A tremendous amount of power was imbued in such a simple punch from his small fist. The shock wave from the punch even caused the atmosphere to tremble. The divine silhouette of Futian manifested behind the figure of Futian the Great. Stretching his hands forward, he tried to fend off the attack. In the collision with the tiny fist of his opponent, the child's punch easily crushed his offense and struck his body, including the divine silhouette of Futian. Nothing could halt it in its tracks. Eventually, the body of Futian the Great was broken into pieces. His face blanched as terror flashed across his eyes. His technique was rendered ineffective by a single punch again. The spiritual soul of Futian the Great was disintegrated as he stared at the atmosphere in despair. Eventually, his figure and great path were reduced to nothingness. This fight had attracted the attention of many surrounding cultivators. After all, the one who had gone for the kill was a child with terrifying divine power. After turning his gaze in this direction, Futian caught sight of that child. Needless to say, this individual was no ordinary kid. To wield a divine power of this caliber, would this person be another exterior incarnation of the human ancestor? Whoosh! Gu Donglu turned his body into a flash of light and appeared above that child. A divine demon diagram manifested following that, causing the mood of the atmosphere to change drastically. Nonetheless, that child lifted his head and shot Gu Donglu a mocking and disparaging look. Moreover, the former even shot 2 rays of the divine light of annihilation from his eyes that traversed the void, firing at the latter. Immediately, an ominous sound filled the air as the scenery behind Gu Donglu began to transform into a massive catalogue that appeared to hold a world within it. A blood-curdling aura of the divine power permeated from the catalogue filled with immortals, monsters, demons, and gods. When the divine light of annihilation was fast approaching, a spectacular sword chi burst out of the catalogue, colliding with the former and cancelling out each other in the void. Yi Futian did not worry much about his third senior brother, Gu Donglu, after watching the latter's fight, because he had been meditating on the path-slaying cultivation. Hence, the man had become an extremely powerful cultivator. He should be able to handle an exterior incarnation that the human ancestor had created alone. There were destructive storms everywhere on the battlefield. The scale of the battle was so intense that the fabric of space was torn into pieces. Hence, it was the reason this war was called the Battle of the Gods. Their clashes in multiple locations had demolished the atmosphere of the heavenly realm, causing dimensional cracks to appear. With that, some of them left that place and headed to a different battleground. Whoosh! Some destructive turbulence swept across the location of Yi Futian. Instantly, he set his eyes in the direction of the human ancestor and noticed that the latter was standing still on his spot as he turned his gaze to the former. He activated his divine power and circulated it within his body right after stepping forward. As expected, he had to be the one taking on the human ancestor personally, after all. Before he could land his first strike, a bolt of black lightning flashed across the void and came into sight. Noticing that, Yi Futian came to a halt and turned to peer at the silhouette. To his surprise, that person was the Dark Sovereign. However, this time, the Dark Sovereign had unmasked herself, no longer keeping her identity a secret. The moment Yi Futian paid attention to her, he was stunned by the revelation of her real face. Please keep reading on MYB0XN0VL. Although the Buddha of Destiny did not mention this to Yi Futian, the latter had felt relieved by the fact. In retrospect, it would make sense why she could take control of a continent in the dark world, which would eventually be called the Island of Miracles. After all, she was the exterior incarnation of the Dark Sovereign. In that case, there must still be some light left inside the heart of the Dark Sovereign, so that an island of light without any dispute could exist in the dark world. A place filled with open-hearted and genuine people. Perhaps, that was the ideal world the Dark Sovereign had ever wanted. Unfortunately, such a utopia could only stay as a fairy tale. Yi Futian could tell that the Dark Sovereign was utterly disappointed at this world. Therefore, she had built the kingdom of darkness in the dark world to destroy this world, plunging it into darkness, so that light could be born in the absolutely wicked and corrupted world. She was a bigot. But even so, it couldn't change the fact that she had goodness in her heart. In contrast, the human ancestor might be deemed the progenitor of humankind and the embodiment of righteousness. But under the mask of his pretense, he was a man of absolute darkness who had shed innocent blood with his hands. He was the person who had started the War of the Seven Realms, one who had regarded the lives of the people as disposables. He too had wished to build his ideal world. A world that he had absolute control and sovereignty. A world of the gods where he was their creator. After the Dark Sovereign, yet another beam of divine light descended. The evil emperor had arrived too. He had fought fiercely against the Dark Sovereign, but neither could defeat the other. After the Dark Sovereign, yet another beam of divine light descended. The evil emperor had arrived too. He had fought fiercely against the Dark Sovereign, but neither could defeat the other. However, the Dark Sovereign was not looking at the evil emperor right now. Instead, she kept staring at the human ancestor. "It's you, right?" she asked. The human ancestor was also looking at the Dark Sovereign. Then he said, "Cheer, why do you not greet your master?" Boom. Even though the Dark Sovereign already guessed it, her heart still twitched fiercely after receiving the answer. Her destructive aura swept through uncontrollably. Her eyes were filled with endless hatred as she glared at the other. The gods and battles surrounding them were also quite shocked inside. The human ancestor was the Dark Sovereign's master? Why? Why did I have to do all that? As the will of the 6 emperors, the Dark Sovereign's mindset had always been very determined, but she still lost control of her emotions now, as she demanded at the human ancestor loudly. The sealed memories, the memories she had buried, now flooded her mind, taking over her entire brain. It was like a nightmare. It seemed now that the dreams from before were foreshadowing, or perhaps she had felt that this day would come. Because you have a pure heart, so I chose you. This is your luck to go from a mundane human and transform into a god, the human ancestor said calmly. The Dark Sovereign seemed to be his experiment or project to create a god. It is not only you. He is my choice as well. Otherwise, do you think you really would have the chance to prove your path? The human ancestor said, looking at the evil emperor. Even Futian felt shaken inside. Half of the 6 emperors in the world had been created by him. The human ancestor had been creating gods since many years ago. He had also been controlling the state of the world these countless years. Everything was under his control. Please keep reading on MYB0X and 0VL. Only the Heaven Realm was not under his control. The Heaven Realm first had the Heavenly Emperor, and then the Sovereign Princess. They had all been very troublesome for him. In the current generation, it had passed on to Futian. The world of Buddhism and Devil World had nothing to do with the human ancestor. Cheer, return to Master's side, the human ancestor said. I could create you, so I can also destroy you. There is no need to be obsessed with past hatred and conflicts. You are a god now, a god standing at the peak of the world. You will help me manage the world from now on, becoming the leader of the gods. We will create a world of gods together. Boom! As soon as the human ancestor finished speaking, a horrifying world-ending tribulation appeared in the dome of the sky. Pitch-black divine tribulations dropped down. The entire world transformed into a dark and dead world. Seeing this scene, the human ancestor's brows furrowed, but he recovered after a moment and said to the Dark Sovereign, "Why do this to yourself?" He did not attack, but the evil emperor already had. Gold spatial divine light flashed and enveloped the vast space. It clashed against the other party's divine power. It was like a world-destroying battle had erupted in the place they were located in right now. But everyone on this battlefield seemed to be used to it already and was not shocked. There were divine battles everywhere, with different great emperor cultivators in different spaces. Every grand battle was earth-shattering, destroying and upending the world. Futian glanced at this messy battlefield. Then his gaze moved towards the human ancestor. He had paused earlier, but now he started walking out again. The 9 dragons' divine light shimmered around his body and illuminated the sky, creating a natural phenomenon. A long spear appeared in Futian's hand, blazing with destructive divine light. The human ancestor looked up and gazed at Futian. His eyes grew a bit graver too. Then the clouds shone in the sky above the human realm, and countless beams of divine light fell, descending upon the human ancestor's body. He bathed under these beams of divine light. Then the human ancestor's body enlarged wildly. He crossed the vast space, covering the portion of the sky. His body was now big enough to cross stars, as if he could destroy a continent with a finger. The human ancestor now was like a god of creation. He scrutinized the people, and also examined the insignificant Futian. Before him, Futian was just like an ant. The human ancestor's eyes scanned Futian. Divine light shot out of his eyes and transformed into chaotic divine thunder. Countless divine swords appeared from this mass of chaos true thunder that shot towards Futian's body. It was like he could kill and destroy someone with just one glance. He was no longer borrowing power from the heavenly path. Instead, he was an existence comparable to the heavenly path. The thunder that his eyes summoned was the chaos true thunder. His force was the most original force in the world. It seemed that the space Futian was in was about to be flooded. The chaos true thunder's attack was coming, and he was too minuscule in comparison. It was like an average human standing in the heavens, facing the thunder and lightning from the heavens. He could be drowned and buried in an instant. If it were any other great emperor cultivator, they would not be able to fend off such a terrifying attack at all. Yi Futian also understood why the other gods listened to the human ancestor's orders. In reality, the human ancestor already possessed supreme divine power after returning. Even great emperors were not enough to be treated with respect by him, let alone an average person. Please keep reading on MYB0XN0VL. Calm immense chaos true thunder flooded the world, sweeping toward Yi Futian's body like a raging current. However, Yi Futian's body was unmoving. He bathed in the light of the chaos true thunder. He was actually ignoring the human ancestor's super strong attack. Yi Futian's eyes were frightening, dazzling with divine light. He stared at the humongous and giant divine figure across from him. He was minuscule, but he had created his own micro-heavenly path. He had a path that was independent from the world. Nowadays his great path was already complete. It would not be so easy to bring him down. The human ancestor was not surprised either. In a certain way, Yi Futian was the one who was closest to him. He had created the micro-heavenly path with his mortal body, establishing his world, and creating an independent law of time and space. Yi Futian was already like a creator, a god of creation now. They were the only two who had made such accomplishments in this world. Boom! The human ancestor raised a fist and sent a blow towards Yi Futian. When the blow landed, the space of the heaven realm started collapsing like crazy. All the law of the great path turned to dust under his punch. This punch did not seem to have the light of divine power, but it also seemed to contain the world's strongest force. The human ancestor had already returned to the basics. Every single move or action came from the source of the path. The divine light that shot out of his eyes was the power of chaos, while the intent of his punch could destroy a world. The windstorm swept over, shattering the void. The space around Yi Futian's body started collapsing and crumbling crazily. His robes fluttered, and his white hair flew. Moving his feet slightly, Yi Futian stabbed his long spear forward. The moment he stabbed it out, the spear in his hands enlarged rapidly. It blazed with supreme divine light and penetrated the space with one blow, crashing against the incoming punch from the human ancestor. The instant that the blows crashed, a deep and low sound emitted from the vast world. Everyone felt this horrifying quake. Yi Futian's body was forced into a retreat. That frightening fist intent also broke apart. The surrounding space was collapsing and cracking crazily, while the frightening spatial currents ravaged wildly. Yi Futian's body was forced into a retreat. That frightening fist intent also broke apart. The surrounding space was collapsing and cracking crazily, while the frightening spatial currents ravaged wildly. But neither Yi Futian nor the human ancestor cared at all. With their current cultivation states, they could pass freely within the space windstorm. Divine power of the world? Yi Futian asked, looking at the human ancestor. Divine power is just the law and order. At present, I represent the law of the heavenly path, so why do I care about divine power? The human ancestor said. His voice reverberated through the vast and boundless world, making many cultivators feel their eardrums quivering. He was the heaven. He represented the heavenly path. His every casual move was the law. He was the law's incarnate itself. He agreed with what he heard from the other. After he had constructed the heavenly path world, his two eyes had transformed into the moon and sun, and he could form thunder and lightning by raising his hands. They were both the incarnates of the laws. Divine power was no longer important. The human ancestor's one punch was like the force of a world slamming down. One could imagine how aggressively powerful he was. Holy light enveloped Yi Futian's body. He bathed under the halo, and natural phenomena occurred. The moon, sun, and stars revolved around him. Countless beams of light flowed around him like time and space were changing. The spear in his hand did not seem realistic, but it blazed with an incredible aura. With one thought, Yi Futian's body vanished. Bang! His body carried the long spear and stabbed into the human ancestor's giant body with a loud bang. The human ancestor's magnificent body was penetrated, and Yi Futian killed his way in. But then he discovered that he'd broken into a wintry world that could even solidify space. The human ancestor's physical body was its own world. Forcing in here did not seem meaningful. Please keep reading on MYB0X and 0VL. Boom. Yi Futian's body passed through from the other side, and he saw the human ancestor's broken body heal instantly. It was just like before. It seemed as if it had not been injured at all. Yi Futian's attack appeared to be futile and completely meaningless. I have transformed into the heavenly path and have an immortal body. Who can kill me? The human ancestor's voice was extremely domineering. He was the heaven. He was the path. He had finally become an undying god from a mere mortal, and was now the supreme being. Now he would not die. No one in the world could kill him. No one is infallible, Yi Futian said in reply. Gods were people too. Since they were people, then there were no absolutely immortal beings. His body vanished from the spot once again. The frightening long spear attacked somewhere on the human ancestor's huge frame. A hole appeared on the human ancestor's body, but divine spatial light shot out of that hole to imprison him there. However, Yi Futian's body vanished instantly and reappeared somewhere else. He transformed into beams of light and streaks of shadows, sending blows onto the human ancestor's body again and again. The human ancestor's star-like body continuously shattered and collapsed. There were cracks everywhere, but just as he had said, he had an immortal body. This was not even his true form. It was just a clone. The human realm's divine light continued to wash over his body. His broken body sent down countless beams of destructive tribulation light shrouded over the vast void. It included chaos, true thunder, tribulations of destruction, and shredding swords. Yi Futian saw this scene while his body hovered in the air. His eyes swept towards the vast space. In an instant, everything in his vision was enveloped in a domain. The attacks coming at him murderously from all directions suddenly slowed down, and then stopped. The human ancestor looked at Yi Futian. When he met Yi Futian's eyes, his gaze froze too, seeming to stop there. One could not call Yi Futian's eyes anymore. They represented time and space. Just as the human ancestor had said, they created a world and transformed it into the heavenly path. They had surpassed the category of physical bodies. Every part of their body was a path. Yi Futian looked at the still human ancestor. His two eyes transformed into paths, and were extremely frightening. He looked towards the chaos, true thunder, tribulations of destruction and shredding swords, and everything was destroyed. They were turned into nothingness, and obliterated directly. All this time, Yi Futian had been pursuing the extremes of cultivation. What was extreme? How could you reach the extremes? He had not figured it out yet. But over these past years, he had at least taken a few more steps down that road. After his heavenly path world was completed, he could establish a divine domain of time and space. In that divine domain, he could change the flow of time. At the extreme, he could reduce the flow of time by 81 times. The difference of 81 times was close to stopping. But merely this was not enough. His father, Donghuang the Great, cultivated the revelation divine power. The extremity of revelation was nothingness. He believed that nothingness was one of the final points of cultivation. The extremity of Buddhist was emptiness, for all to be empty. Were nothingness and emptiness similar? Building from that, Yi Futian figured out the ultimate path of destruction, an evolution of the path of time and space. Please keep reading on MYB0X and 0VL. Time and space collapse. He gazed into the distance, and all objects in this space collapsed and shattered, getting destroyed and turning into nothingness. The chaos, true thunder, and tribulations of destruction were also extinguished like this. Yi Futian looked towards the majestic frame of the human ancestor. That frightening divine body was also collapsing and shattering. All physical objects were going to be destroyed and turned into nothingness. The long spear in Yi Futian's hands blazed with supreme divine power. His body flashed, and he stabbed the spear forward, hitting the human ancestor's majestic and giant body. In an instant, the entire time and space constricted rapidly and collapsed, turning into a horrifying black hole. Everything was going to be destroyed and buried. The human ancestor's boundlessly huge body was quickly shrinking too. It collapsed in an extremely short instant, shattering and turning into nothingness. It was swallowed by the black hole windstorm. This was also an evolution of the spear technique Entombed. It was practically an undefeatable spear attack. Soon, the majestic frame that had stood in the vast void was destroyed and disappeared. It seemed to have been buried by this spear, but Yi Futian did not relax. His eyes continued staring forward. This battle was a battle that determined the fates of every soul. He had always wanted to wait until he comprehended the ultimate truth of cultivation. He would never take the initiative to attack, if not for the crisis of survival of the Seven Realms. Many people in the surrounding battlefields looked toward where the human ancestor had been. The human ancestor's magnificent body had been killed. Yi Futian had killed it. The hearts of many great emperors jumped in extreme shock. Nowadays, the 6 emperors were probably no longer Yi Futian's match. As for those average great emperors, they would be even less of a match for Yi Futian's spear. Was the human ancestor dead? Some great emperor battles even stopped. They stared at Yi Futian's battlefield. If the human ancestor had been killed, then it meant that this battle was over. But could the human ancestor die so easily? That had only been the human ancestor's clone. A horrifying aura circulated through the sky over the human realm, and limitless divine light shone down. An incredible and peerless divine might radiated out, causing the hearts of many strong figures to pulse. The human ancestor was alright as expected. Yi Futian had only killed the human ancestor's clone, his spokesperson in the human realm. The true human ancestor had not yet appeared. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.